fantastic Thanksgiving. I also have here with me Peter Rusinellis, who's going to support as we get through some of the Q&A and competitive discussions. Really appreciate your time. So here's what we're going to do, and I will go quickly to get it over to Ed Corrigan. We're going to do the background, the guest speaker introduction. Ed's got some highlights from his work and some of these products that I think you'll love. And then we're going to do some Q&A and common questions around the competitive environment and a couple recommendations on some high yield corn and soybean programs in season. And then we'll wrap it up and always end with reminding everybody to don't forget the utility products in Octaline. Okay. So our objective, as always, gain confidence in discovering needs and position the unique benefits of the NutriBoost family of products to help you grow your Streamline business. And most of all, as Rob Seco is driving all this, is help that Rob Seco hybrid or variety perform at its absolute best so you can continue to build and earn and have those enduring relationships with the farmers you serve. So that's why we're here. Paul, your leadership there has built a model around four pillars, all supported at the bottom here of hybrid and varietal alignment. But today we're going to take this hour on really the in season. We talked about the foundation, residue release, which Ed might lean into a little bit because he did a lot of research there. His insights, since we have them, might be good with that. Of course, we started with that in Tune Up Plus. It featured that in that early potential, and now we're going to say, hey, we got a great V5 stand to corn. We've got canopy, and now how are we going to put the pedal to the metal and go for yield and feed this crop in season? So that's our plan. We sell through passes. Our goal here for you as professionals in the seed business is to provide you another great opportunity to be on that farm 6 times a year to bring value to that relationship. And this is our focus now is in that post-emergicide and fungicide pass. So here we go. It's my honor to introduce Ed Corrigan. Gentleman that's helped the Streamline and the team here build this strategy and has a wealth of understanding and a history in crop production here in the Midwest and beyond that's really hands-on, and we're appreciative to have you, Ed. I will stop sharing, Ed, and if you want to take it from there.
Okay, let's see if I can make this all work. Is that the right one? I think it is.
I can see your screen, Ed.
Okay, good. I'm going to start her into production. So thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. Sitting back here waiting for the winter to kind of get started and get rolling. We're rolling through a lot of data. A lot of data is coming in on the products and really what happened. And so I'd like to first focus on really my playground the last 15 years at Brandt has been this research farm of about 300 acres, 1,300 trials per year that we're looking at, trying to come up with ways to take a look and evaluate different types of farming practices on a basis that help growers. And we give a lot of tours out here at just outside of Springfield, Illinois, Pleasant Plains, where the company started back in 1953. So with that, I'm first going to attempt to go through a few of the trials and give you a view of what happened here, and then start to move into what some of the trials with the NutriBoost products that we've been able to gather so far. There's still obviously a lot of trial work at universities and different places across the U.S. to take a look at, but this will give you an idea. So I'm going to focus on a few different things that kind of highlights. Planting date has always been one of the most important things. Solar optimization is something that we're trying to figure out ways to get sunshine to be utilized better by the crops And so we've come up with some very unique ways. Sometimes the internet feeds us things that actually helps us in the farming practices and nitrogen rate. And what happened with that this last year here down in Springfield area, the foliar NKB product line, what went on in that process, residue release, that biological that Rob talked about, really starting to change how our crops are being produced, and then our response to population, and of course, post-herbicide stress mitigation. So post-herbicides create a little stress, and we try and figure out ways to mitigate that stress. So that's kind of what I'm going to quickly run through and give you an idea of what we see this last year compared to the last 15 years. So this is a large, very extensive graphing system that we've used, and we've got a lot of information, and it's to kind of give our local growers and what happened here, but it also gives a lot of people an area. And so as we look first, planting date's always been one of the most important. Planting date really had less impact this year than the last few years. Solar maximization skip row, we'll talk about that in a minute. You'll see some pictures of what we're talking about, but it actually improved a little bit over last year. The other thing, nitrogen rates. We had some of the lowest response to nitrogen that we've ever had. We still needed nitrogen, but really once we got above 150 units of N on our fields, we couldn't really get much more yield. It was a real year that we got a lot of mineralization, and we'll talk about that when we get to those slides. We also seen the fungicide plus the NKB product. That really gave us some great responses. The crop rotation penalty, corn on corn versus corn on soybeans. Corn on corn, typically we've been averaging 26 bushel per acre loss to that penalty. We actually had a negative 5.9 bushel. So the corn on corn won this year. Unbelievable in our area. And I think there's some small things that we can take a look at and understand. Population rate, some of the higher populations continue to really drive that because we had the nutrition and the biological activity. And of course, 20-inch rows versus 30-inch rows, it was much tighter race than normal. Typically 20-inch rows, the narrower rows win. And so this is one of those things that we continue to evaluate for growers in our area that want to try and maximize yield. So let's jump right into it. I've got a couple of slides that lead in. This is that since 2007, the last 15 years that I've been at Brandt, I've kept track of really what the dollar value, given the price of the commodity at this harvest time period, whether it be corn or soybeans, and the yield. And you can see corn just absolutely crushed soybeans this year. Doesn't mean that soybeans were bad value. There's a lot of investment in corn, but really approached that $2,000 an acre here in central Illinois. As we take a look back at that graph and think about those first things, corn planting date trial, this is one of them that's really been leading. You can see the lines this year, 284, 280 bushel for planting the first time. And we really planted later. And that's what created the missed opportunity, is we couldn't really get into the field. It was a much cooler, damper spring than it has been for the last few years. You can see those stars and where we were, and a lot of that was 300, 350 bushel corn because we could plant early. And so it was really one of the things that held us back. We still had very good response to planting early, as you can see, but we just didn't have the opportunity for that additional 40, 50 bushel that we would have gotten. This is what we call solar maximization. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get more sunshine down between these rows. So we skip a row. So that's why we call it skip row. And to try and utilize this, we're trying to increase the population in these rows so that we average 45,000 plants per acre. And that's really about the population that my corn here in Pleasant Plains is between 40 and 45,000 is kind of an ideal population. So that means I have to plant each one of these rows at 60,000 plants per acre to keep the plants per acre averaged at that 45,000. And so this is what it looks like a year ago that we got that 60 more bushel per acre at harvest time. And you can kind of see the configuration of plant 2, skip 1, plant 2, skip 1. So those are 5-foot breaks, but it allows the sun to move down through here, and it also allows the air to move through those plants at night to cool them off. So that seems to be something that didn't really expect it to work, but it's been working real well for us. And you can kind of see in the upper right-hand corner what it looked like in the trials this year. And this is at 70,000 pop. It was a little higher. It really, the population going to 70 didn't help. What we really did see is that 30-inch rows, 2 by 2 by 2, just like we talked about at 60,000 was 351 bushel per acre. When we took and changed that configuration to 70,000, we dropped 40 bushel. And when we looked at just a straight 30-inch row at 44,000, which is kind of our typical, it dropped 65.7 bushel, which is real comparable to last year. So we're continuing to get high yields from this architecture of changing our population by row spacing that we really haven't ever expected. And of course, then we tried some other trials of, well, what if we skip 3 rows and 2 rows? And that didn't work out very well either. As you can see, it really dropped it down. So it looks like we need to go that way. We tried some 20-inch rows and skipping there. And so a straight 20-inch row at 44,000 was 329.8, really good yield, comparable back here, but still not as good as that skip row at really the same population per acre. Same hybrid planted the same day. And so then if we looked at 20-inch with a skip, it didn't want, so there, it's kind of telling us, the data is telling us we really can't skip a lot of small skips. We have to do that 5 foot, it looks like, just like they're seeing in some of the other countries I visit. So the other opportunity is this solar maximization, is intercropping. And some growers are doing this where they'll plant corn and beans together, and they'll increase their population on the outer rows to try and give a higher ear count out here. And so this is an example of a 20-inch row. 30-inch rows would be just similar. You plant your normal pop in the center of that 8 rows or your planter, and then plant higher pop where you get more sun, and that's how you try and achieve additional yield. You can see this picture, what we had here. So this is at 60,000 plants per acre, filled the ears very well. We actually did much better than a flat rate. So flat rate was 292. When we did a variable rate, we actually bumped up into the 3s, really good. So, but it does make for a little bit different operation. The skip row allows me to go all the way across the cornfield, and I can keep it all one crop if I want, whereas the intercropping, you have to come in, plant it 2 different planters, and you have to harvest 2 different. So it's not as nice, but it still does give a yield lift. And so it's some of the things at the research farm that we're taking a look at beyond nutrition to try and help growers get the most out of those acres. The second thing that we talked about is the NKB with our fungicide. If we just did one trip, we made one application, and at that R1 stage, kind of a typical, we ended up getting 36.3 bushel per acre. And so the fungicide alone is giving us somewhere in that 20 bushel, 25 bushel, and we'll get another 10 bushel a lot of times out of this NKB product from the NutriBoost line. And that is one of the things that we've really found has minimized stress, and we'll talk about that a little bit later here. But NKB continues to be one of the best products, and the timing for that product is in the mid stages of corn development. As we take a look at a little bit broader, using that NutriBoost N plus NKB, so we'll add that to the fungicide, and we'll go at multiple timings. And I know this is a lot of data, but it kind of gives you an idea where we're headed. We're looking at different populations, and this is in a 20-inch row, and we've got some 30-inch row coming, but gives you an idea of the responses. So if we use no foliars, no fungicides, no micronutrients, and we just plant the corn, we'll be in that low 200 bushel range here in our soils. And if we start to add a V5 application and a V12 and an R1, you can see we can continue to push those yields up. And it's actually the 48,000 population in a 20-inch row that maximized our yield potential of the specific hybrid we had here. And so it's all about taking that hybrid and letting it have the right nutrition, the right protection, and micronutrients make a huge role in converting sunshine. And you can see the dark green color that we had once we made those 3 applications of fungicide and micronutrients, NutriBoost N and NKB. We call it a progressive treatment here at the research farm. We do the same thing in 30-inch rows. 30-inch rows were actually very close to the same trajectory of yield. So it started out just a little higher yield, very similar though to 20s. So it's the same hybrid planted the same day in 20s using the same program, but 40,000 was the correct population to maximize yield in those 30-inch rows. And of course, here's a picture with 50,000. We push those pops quite a bit higher just to see what they'll do. So it's really the ability of that nutrition plus protection. And that's what the fungicides tend to do for us here in Illinois, is they protect them, but they also increase our sunshine. And so we really see a big yield lift. We talked about the residue release, the biologicals that will help break down the stalks. And I had the opportunity, we've got 70 acres here at the research farm. That's best as we can tell, about 40 years of corn on corn, never been in any other crop. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to take a look at residue release. And we applied it in the fall after we harvested the corn last year, applied it and broadcast it on those acres. We had it in some different tillage. So each one of those lines is a little bit different tillage system, and they're comparable line to line, the yellow being untreated, the red being treated. And so we gained that 7 to 8 bushel per acre, and that biological broke down that stalk, allowed the stalk to release those toxins that we know are in there. And it also helped make for better plantability. A couple of those, like the 266 bushel mark in the yellow and the 272, that's actually no-till. So we didn't do any tillage. We actually just sprayed the product and applied it, planted, and that's really a great response for just something that we're putting 12 ounces per acre on that crop to try and break that residue down. So it really improved our ability to increase yields and get better yields in a corn on corn situation. This is something that was very unique this year to our research farm, is we had a nitrogen trial system that we've had for a number of years, and where we go from 0 rates of N to up to 300 units of N. And I've got displayed a picture that I took after pollination. You can see, and even 0 rates of N this year gave us tremendous yield. And this is a corn on soybean situation. So it's a first year corn. We've got it in a corn on corn in the red graph. And so it dropped down quite a bit. But as we started adding nitrogen, the corn on corn really started doing very well at 150 units of N. As we continued to apply higher and higher rates of N, we couldn't get more yield. We really have to start pushing our micronutrients, fungicides, other things to create more yield and maximize our yields to get them up into the 300 bushel range, which is really where growers are trying to achieve here in the state of Illinois. So zero nitrogen, you can see it doesn't look like it needs much nitrogen. And part of this nitrogen, we got away with a very good mineralization year. So the weather pattern itself, last fall, early harvest, last fall, we ended up having a lot of mineralization in our soils. The biologicals are really upstaged in our system, and that allowed it to create a lot of nutrition. And then we maximize that nutrition with applying some other elements, the other 15 elements beyond nitrogen. So zero in, probably not see this again. However, we look like we're in the same weather pattern as I look at it today here in Illinois that we had last year. And I think that's why the state of Illinois is projected to have a record 215 bushel per state average on corn.
Wow.
So when we moved to soybeans, and one of the trials that I ran a lot of when we were starting some of these new technologies that NutriBoost has in it, and the NKB and the N product, we really knew that as we applied post herbicides, and so this is an example of one of those trials. I ran a lot of them with different modes of action. You can kind of see, I applied this herbicide a little bit on the late side. Part of it was because of my schedule being away from the research farm this summer. And when I got back here in town, I decided, you know what, we need to put this stress mitigation trial out. So we're creating stress from like Flexstar or N plus Roundup or just straight Flexstar, a check, which means we didn't put any specialized herbicide on there. And you can see it out yielded the rest of the products, Liberty, glufosinate, Roundup or glyphosate. Resource is one of those burners, you know, that we use small amounts, just 4 ounces per acre, but it actually burnt enough. It didn't, the crop didn't like it. So those soybeans at R2, when we put just the herbicide on, we actually saw quite a bit of stress. And this is one of the trials, and it actually, if you look close, you can see these are 8-row trials, and the length of this is about 1,000 feet. And all the first 250 feet here where it's turning it green even 60 days later. So it slowed down the metabolism when we used one of those products. And that was kind of interesting. And that product was really Liberty, which is kind of thought to be, everyone's kind of thinking, well, that product really doesn't cause much issue, but it actually, as you looked across these trials, left a longer lasting greening, which is a, you know, kind of a bad sign, and it shows that it really hurt the yield. So when we added the NutriBoost N and the NKB to that, we actually saw that it improved those yields, helped the plant to metabolize each one of those herbicides and improve the yields by about that 8 to 10 bushel. That's a lot of soybeans to be able to reduce that. Now, this is not normal to apply it at R2, I understand that, but we see the same thing even at earlier stages, and that's really what we started out 15 years ago when I got at Brandt here, to create technologies, and our lab people did a fantastic job of accomplishing that, creating technologies that would allow us to blend in with each of these herbicide families and then reduce the stress. And so the micronutrients that are involved in these products are very much different than anything else on the market. And it's what's really allowed us to move across 55 countries outside the US to provide this technology and really assist with this stress relief. So that's really one of the main things that Brandt is always trying to do, is not only just feed the nutrition to the crop, but also reduce the stress, whether it be from heat stress, chemical stress, insect stress, fungicide stress. Each one of those creates a problem that we need to restart that plant.
Hey, Ed, just I saw on here some folks from the southern part of the territory for Streamline. Whenever you felt like it, if you could weave in a little cotton
Okay.
insights, I think I always apologize ahead of time that I can barely be conversant in corn, but since you're here today, if you felt like leaning into a couple other crops, whenever it felt right for you, that'd be good.
So when we think about, and I'll move on to the next graph, and I think I can portray a little bit of what we're seeing in the cotton crop. In fact, last week, and we had a number of our cotton experts. We brought in about 90 people from across the U.S. that actually work for Brandt in other areas of the state, of the United States, and they actually gave us some really good feedback on cotton and how it works. And it's very similar to the soybean in my estimation. Obviously, they're using a little bit of a different characteristics in regards to the staging of that cotton plant, but we're seeing the same responses to some of the same types of application, and really the product NKB is really, really influential in cotton production, as well as the enzymes. The enzymes that we're going to talk about here in a minute, the zinc up, are very, very important in getting that cotton plant off and getting some biologicals rolling. And so that'll be a part of this process. So when we look through this soybean, kind of a way to protect the genetic potential of whether it be a soybean or a cotton plant, it's really about priming that soil. We use the NutriBoost Zinc Up to accomplish that. We'll go into that in a minute. We nextly use the stress mitigation, the NutriBoost N. We see the same types of things when we're applying herbicides to soybeans, to cotton, to corn, to peanuts. We'll add this product to the herbicide family, and it reduces that stress. And then the flowering for soybeans, once we get into the flowering stage, which is really near to kind of like that bowl set in cotton, it's really about a little bit of a blend of NutriBoost N and NKB, or just NKB. And the NKB, that product has actually been one that our cotton producers are coming back, and the people that we work with in the consulting business say we've never seen very many 7-lock bowls of cotton. In other words, that's kind of like a 5 or a 6 pod soybean. They've never seen one, and this product is producing it wherever that product is going out. And it really assists. And if you think about the opportunity to push a little bit of boron, boron is such an instrumental product when it comes to soybeans and cotton. Most of the crops, peanuts, and for those that are rotating in and out of cotton and peanut production, peanuts have actually been very, very responsive to this same NKB product. And we'll go through that a little bit with corn and soybeans. Apologize that I didn't think about putting something together on cotton.
No, that was a curveball. I just was looking at some of the folks out there.
Yeah.
Joining. That's my bad.
Yep. That's fine. And I'm not a great cotton specialist, but you know what? I'm a quick learner, and I really associate as I talk and go walk through some of those cotton fields with the growers. You can kind of pick up pretty quickly what the reaction process is. And if you look at the plant physiological process, whether it be a cotton plant or a soybean plant, yeah, you've got different fruits, but it's actually very similar in trying to use boron and a mobile boron to change that plant's ability to produce correctly. And we really don't realize how important that boron, molybdenum, and all these crops to converting nitrogen and making it useful in the plant to help with that production process. The last thing on soybeans is really about, and this is probably the biggest lesson we've learned here in the state of Illinois, is to not give up on our beans. Most of our growers at pod fill we're talking R4 to R6. They're making multiple passes of NKB, and they start to take a look at the insect pressure, and they're adding that NKB to the insecticides. And so they're keeping the bugs out. Stink bugs have become really difficult for us. I think it's talking to growers across the US, it seems like that is one of the battles that's out there. And then adding that NKB, we actually add a little bit of boost into that NKB, and that is actually given us the best responses for soybeans and corn. So it's really about those four main goals: priming it, trying to get those plants off and get the biological system started with that zinc up, stress mitigation with the host herbicides, typically what the growers are trying to accomplish, and then moving back through. So this is kind of the soybean program. It's very similar, and it's going to end up being, it's just about the staging. And so that would really be the difference in cotton, is the staging of the process. So we're really looking at doing the same types of things, priming the soil with NutriBoost Zinc Up, and we'll talk about how that works in the soil here in a minute. The NutriBoost N, trying to get there so that we're taking the stress off that plant just as that ear girth is set. And that is very, very important. And herbicides, they have to be metabolized by the corn plant or soybean plant or cotton plant. And that's what our products do. They help the manganese, the zinc, the sulfur assist the plant to metabolize by throwing out enzymes. The plant will release enzymes by having that metal available to it, and it'll increase the way in which that herbicide is broke down. Therefore, you don't have that whitening effect or yellowing effect from those herbicide families. And then the NKB is all about kernel development. It looks like, from the data we continue to get on corn in particular, that V10 stage is probably the very best. And we've got some University of Illinois data that it is fantastic about pointing out what this timing is. And we see the same thing here at the research farm about that V10 timing, which can actually mean a ground application with most of our sprayers out there. So very important. And then filling those kernels, as we talk to the high yield growers across the United States, typically they're looking at that NutriBoost N, that little bit of zinc and manganese and NKB, but NKB is once again probably the workhorse of being able to give us that additional yield that we've never been able to get with just a little bit of boron and molybdenum from the older technology products. So it's an upstage. That NKB is the new sheriff. I still, ever since I saw that come out 3 years ago, it is the sheriff, and we're going to have a hard time finding a sheriff that'll beat that one. So,
as we look around the competitive environment, Ed, we have not seen anything like it, or anybody that's out there that we would compete against that has the ability to hold that much potassium, molybdenum, and boron in the same solution in such a great formula. I mean,
so it is technology. It's not just about the nutrients themselves. It's the technology that Brandt really brings to the table. And thank goodness, when I was hired here in 2007, we also hired a young chemist that has created this technology. All you had to do is coach him into, hey, this is what we need. And he would come back just a few months later with something that was 10 times what you asked for. And NKB is one of those products. So that one is changing the grape market, the apple market, the citrus market, the blueberry. It is something that we really are just starting to understand where it can and can't go. It's breaking a lot of rules. So this is kind of a quick, I thought it would give you some guidelines as you think through these products. It helps me to keep these products in line with the timing of the crop, And we can put together and force those out to the group with Streamline for cotton and peanuts and some of these others, these same type timings, and give some better guidelines. So let's jump into this NutriBoost Zinc Up. It's really the first stage, and what that really contains is 9% zinc. So it's basically like a pint worth of 9% zinc if you're putting it on, and it's got 2 stable enzymes, and enzymes are one of the workhorses that we really have been able to have stabilized. And so we'll talk about that and really how that is different than anything else on the market. So an enzyme, it's really about that it is one of the catalysts out there in the biological action. Basically, enzymes are something that are workhorses. They actually take different particles and either push things together or break things apart. And in the enzymes that Brandt has chose to put in the NutriBoost lineup, this Zinc Up actually breaks apart and allows the nutrition that's in the residue and organic matter to be utilized to start this biological process. So enzymes are not something that are alive. They are something that actually plants produce, biologicals produce. We all know that biologicals are important. And so we've just skipped those 2 steps and put the enzymes in there that actually stimulate more life. So soils are made up of a lot of complex mixtures of minerals and waters. Soils capable of supporting plant life, just like anything with that 0 rate of N, it can, under the right weather circumstances, really create a lot of yield. And they're vital. Enzymes are actually vital to maintaining and improving soil health. They're one of the things that creates that high level of oxygen in the soil and is part of that process. So the 2 enzymes that are in the Zinc Up, the manganese enzyme, and it's actually converting this hemicellulose. So it's a real microscopic particles, and it actually breaks these hemicellulose particles down in the soil into absorbable sugars. And so you can imagine those sugars breaking those apart. That's going to stimulate the plant growth. So it's going to be there for that little corn plant or soybean plant, cotton plant, to actually assist that plant to grow quickly, to create more roots, but it also promotes the microbes. And so there's a process there of first the biologicals, we feed those and get them going, and then we also then can feed the plants, and the microbes can feed the plants. So it's kind of a start the engine, kind of like a little bit of ether on these cold days. It just starts that engine down there. Lipase enzyme really breaks down the lipids. Lipids are from organic residues. Once again, they break down these at the lipid base of the roots and the exudates. Approximately 20% of the organic matter in the soil consists of lipids. So lipids have a huge amount of process, and it's once again breaking those lipid apart. You can kind of see the breaking point here and what we're really trying to accomplish with that enzyme. So when we deliver these enzymes to the soil along with this zinc, they're actually going to go to work right away. And really, soil temperature plays a small role, but it's not like a biological. They go to work and start to prepare things. So it's this cleavage or breaking apart that we're really trying to accomplish with an enzyme, and just like a plant. And we don't have to wait for the plant or the biologicals to produce those. They happen. So manganese, to go into a little further depth, is all about, if you think about a root, and the tip of a root, it actually utilizes the photosynthase. So once that little corn plant gets out of the ground, cotton plant gets out of the ground and starts utilizing sunshine, that plant is going to allocate 20 to 60% of its photosynthase to its roots. And if we can help those roots accommodate with manganese in the soil, that is really going to give us more photosynthase to the plant to be able to grow better above ground as well as the root itself. Roots are obviously the most important part of the any plant. So manganese is all about this mucilage, and it's trying to once again break this particle up to utilize it. It cleaves at the polysaccharides in the mucilage, and that's what we're getting this manna linkage broken. So it's part of the chemistry that Brian brings to the table, our chemist, and that is really what differentiates this product from everything else on the market. So Zinc Up, it's primed and ready to go. When you put that planting in the ground and you put that Zinc Up in there, it'll actually not only provide zinc to the plant, which is a great stimulator of roots, but it also has these enzymes, and it's priming the soil, getting that soil ready for the microbial population and actually release nutrients for the plant itself. So we're really seeing a great response, early response by using this product in the future. The NutriBoost Zinc Up technology, it happens in a small area, and it's actually starting to chew those. You can see those little Pac-Men, the lipase and the mannase, breaking down that residue and releasing those sugars, which is also assisting some of the hormones being released by the soil as well. So this all stimulates the root system, and it's all about this being able to assist that smaller particle to be fed on by the bacteria and stimulate that. So what that's really trying to say is if you're using a biological product with this enzyme, whether it's through some kind of a talc product or some other way that you're applying a biological, this enzyme will actually help feed that and get that population rolling, those CFUs, colony forming units, at a much higher level quicker. So you can see some of the data here, the mannase, how it increases that microbial activity, the CFU count. This is an example of really a control where we don't have the enzymes and zinc, and really enzyme and zincs, there's actually a cofactor that zinc provides to these two enzymes to help them actually be a little stronger, work a little harder. And so that's why partly the zinc is in there, and it also can increase the IBA and humic acid. So all these work together if you'd like to put those in your program as well. But that enzyme zinc is very, very important part of the role. NutriBoost, this is some of the trial data from a year ago. And we really see that evener emergence. You can tell by the ear size and how those plants came up, larger root system at V4, improved stalk health, darker green plants. This is all about setting the stage. And really, we all know how important to get those plants off, whether it be a corn or cotton or soybean. Having an even emergence, even stand is all about where we're trying to head with this Zinc Up. So next we move to that first foliar timing, and the NutriBoost N contains nitrogen, zinc, manganese, sulfur, molybdenum, and boron. So it's actually one of the formulations that assists the plant to kind of meet the needs of getting that plant rolling. And it's a broad spectrum product. We use it in a lot of crops. And as we're running these trials on lettuce or cotton, peanuts, it really has some of the same type of effects. So let's take a look at this technology. It's not just those elements, though, that are important. A lot of people can dump elements into a bucket and get them to you. And Brant is not about trying to accomplish that. So we really want to help understand how the products are working. This is a leaf cutout And you can kind of see as we're dropping this competitor product on the leaf, some of that product always will move into the leaf, but it kind of gets stuck. There's ways in which the plant kind of grabs a hold of those nutrients, whether it's a cation or an anion, a positive or a negative charge, versus the products that the NutriBoost lineup, whether, you know, each one of those elements, we figured out a way, our chemists, to attach them and make them a little different. And so I'll start that video back up again, and you can see we're moving through the leaf and we're actually moving it down the phloem and xylem. Happens very quickly. That is something that really differentiates us. The particle size is one of the things that differentiates us. So the hydrophilic pores that you are seeing here, they're actually small, and our particles are built to actually go down through those fissures to kind of help move it in. So the NutriBoost lineup is not only going up through the xylem, but it's also gone down through the phloem. That's something that most nutrition programs don't have the ability to move in the phloem like our product does. That's what's really different. So most nutrition we're trying to get out of the soil has got to go up through the xylem, and the plant is continually moving both directions with the NutriBoost lineup. Really, really different technology, and we'll go into that a little deeper in a minute. So it's something that's quite different, that's on the market. And when Brian really created this, it allows us to put it on the foliage and get that nutrition to move very quickly. And it actually is why the fruit, whether it be a corn or a cotton boll, a grape, all responds very positive to it. So let me see if I can move this ahead. So that was really the cations. This boron is a negative charge. And so there's a different technology that's actually used with boron. And so our NutriBoost boron is actually has an additive to it that allows it to do the same thing. In this cutaway of the leaf surface, boron will actually get stuck on the pectins. Basically, there's pectins within the leaf, and that'll actually grab most of that boron. So if you'd apply an elemental boron or a 10% boron, a boric acid, there, for the most part, it's going to get stuck in here. You'll get a good tissue test reading, but it will not give you the value of that product. It's about getting that boron to move, and it's actually been something that Dr. Patrick Brown from UC Davis has actually been able to identify with our product that actually sets us apart. So the NutriBoost lineup has some really neat things, a number of ways. It stays compatible. You know, all these things, if you can put a lot of metal into a jar, just it may not be compatible with the herbicide. Our lab teams work real hard to make sure that the products are very compatible with all the fungicides, insecticides, herbicides, any of the crop protection products out there. And we're able to give very good guidelines there. Secondly, it lowers the pH of the solution. I just was talking to a meristem rep yesterday, and it really is one of the things that we sometimes forget about, but we're actually, as we add these products, they buffer the solution that you're applying, whether it be an insecticide, herbicide, and that really increases the value of those herbicides or insecticides to do their job. It's a unique micronutrient protection system, as you just saw, and it's not a chelate or a complex, and it's re-wettable after dry down on the leaf. So it stays, if it dries down, you spray it. It's a real hot, dry day. It'll dry to a gel. Overnight, if you pick up a little moisture on your leaf, which we typically do, it'll actually re-wet and go in. It's not a crystal. So it's quite unique, and it's another way in which our products differentiate themselves. The compatibility is our number one thing that most growers call us and say, I can't get this to mix. What do I do? You know, and so it's something that keeps us out of trouble. Here's one of the things that when we think about this genetic potential in zinc and how important it is, whether it's foliar or whether it's in the soil, zinc is really important to this protein synthesis in plants, the percent of oil, the protein content of the leaves of soybeans. You can really see it upregulates that, and it upregulates that protein. And that's one of the things that the universities, when we give our products out, they say, you guys' product is one of the only ones on the market that will raise the yield and also raise the protein level or the oil level. This is that genetic potential that crop has that without enough zinc doesn't accomplish. So here's a little bit of data as we just got back in. This is 2022 data from Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and the average. And so when we look at NutriBoost N at the V4 stage, we're actually seeing, in this V4 soybeans, we're actually seeing when we add that in, an average 3 more bushel per acre. That's that stress relief that we're really looking for. We'll have a lot more data. There's a lot of data points behind in each one of these states to make up this data, but you can obviously see the yield levels in different states on soybeans have drastically, a lot of disparity back and forth. So it kind of gives you an idea there too. It works in all states. In fact, a lot of times if you look at like this Michigan data, the more stress you have, the better the product works. If that plant is stressed, you'll actually, so in hotter, drier situations or very wet situations, we sometimes see that be the situation to give us the highest yield response. This is another way in which we've really taken a look by sending a drone over and taking an infrared of where we put NutriBoost N, NutriBoost N plus NKB, and it'll actually change right to those 8 rows, the color of those plants. It upregulates the photosynthesis. So that's really important in assisting the plant to create more sugars, create more protein, and utilize its roots. Looks like I put that slide back in again. That looks like what's going on out there. So gives you that same opportunity to accomplish it in all stages of growth, whether it be that you are out there applying a product. Let's move on to the NutriBoost NKB, the new sheriff. So it actually contains potassium. That's the major element, highest percentage. It's got boron. Boron is really one of those elements that assists with the movement of calcium and potassium. Really important in the process of the pollination and flowering to maximize things. And in soybeans, really improves the output of the nodule on the soybean root to create more nitrogen. Molybdenum is also very important there. So that's why we put it in there, and we're seeing very, very good responses. Small amount of N, once again. This is looking back in 2020. It kind of gives you an idea of what we first saw when we ran some of the trials visually. We really see that NKB created a darker green plant compared to the control, or this is actually a 1 gallon rate per acre of 10% boron and a 2 gallon per acre rate of 10% boron versus just a 1 quart rate and a 1 pint rate. You can see the molybdenum darkened the color. That moly, even in a corn plant, cotton plant, soybean plant, it'll upregulate the ability of the plant to utilize nitrogen. That plant can have nitrogen in it, but it isn't very efficient without enough molybdenum. And so that small, tiny amount of moly is very important in this product. And you can see the timing of that NKB in corn. It's this earlier stage. And we found that back then, and the data continues to come. We'll look at here from the university. So this is the U of I trials. This is a picture up at the university this year, back in September 14th. If you just had fungicide applied at V12 and R2, looked pretty darn good. But when you added the NutriBoost NKB, tremendously healthier, better looking crop. It removed a lot of the stress. They went through a time period up there where they had a drought, only had 0.8 of an inch of rain through that tassel and early ear development stage. So that product, that additional K, really assists. And of course, boron is very important, cell walls, and the ability of the plant to utilize that nutrient. It's a stress reliever of its own. We see the yield results, 5 more bushel. When we take a look, they've actually ran a 1 quart per acre at V12. I would even say V10 would actually be a more responsive from what we're seeing in our trial system. V12 is still a good timing. They did a 2 quart at V12. You can see they had a standard program, so it's kind of a lower nutrition population program. It had a good response, but the progressive, where they had a little bit more population, had a little more nutrition, it allowed that corn to utilize that NKB, give us additional yield. And of course, there's no trial that'll give you exactly the same thing. And so there's trying different things. And when we went to R2, it actually reduced the optimum when we went there. It still had a response, so it's still, you looked at 3 or 5 bushel per acre response, that's still a smart thing to do, to add it in if you're just going to hit your corn once with a foliar fungicide. That's what this trial is about. But it was not as ideal as putting on a little bit earlier, and that's what we tend to see here at the research farm the last 3 years. And it's all about potassium, boron, early stages. When we think about that V8, V10, V12 plant, it's pulling up a tremendous amount of potassium. It does the same thing on boron, and it'll actually, once we get into that VTR stage, both of those products drop off, and the boron in particular. So it's trying to get that on a little bit earlier, and that's what we're finding with our data to maximize it. Here's some 2020 data with across the number of states, 9 bushel average, and it's really about this small amount of potassium. You know, we're not trying to meet the needs of the plant with potassium, but we're trying to upregulate this pump. There's a protein pump out there inside the plant, moving the sugars from cell to cell, and that process is upregulated by that small amount of potassium. And that's what we're really after, is moving the sugars. So that sugar mover is helping. The boron is, of course, if we don't have enough, we'll have leaky cells. And when we have leaky cells, we really don't allow the plant to utilize its sugars correctly, and we start to feed the diseases outside those cells. So as we look at soybeans, it's all about the same thing on the NutriBoost N and NKB. It's about trying to upregulate that potting process and flower, minimize the flower abortion. We can lose 70% of the pods. Insects have a lot to do with that a lot of times, so we tend to add this product in. It gives us tremendous bounce back if we do have insects feeding on our leaves or pods, and that's what has been the biggest use here in the state of Illinois. We're looking at an average of 64 bushel per acre right now. We've been as high as, for the county here around the Brant plants, 84 bushel per acre average. So we're pushing our soybeans, and we're really expecting a lot. And it's through those R1 to R6 growth stages that we're very focused on the NKB product to carry the load. So with that, that's kind of a quick overview. What some of the things, I know I went through a lot of data. I'm sure there's some questions.
Yeah, question. I mean, Ed's, any questions for Ed? We have an hour planned for this group, and if you can stay on, great. Ed, first of all, just thank you very much. Any questions out there? So I have about 28 folks with us. I'm guessing some folks had to head off to other meetings. I think Paul had to get in the car to up in Great Falls, Montana, and try to get to somewhere this morning, so he probably didn't have cell phone. But if you wanted to maybe, I'll ask a couple questions just on behalf of the team. So let me, with the little bit of time we have left, the Streamline team is putting together a system for you all to kind of build your own Rubik's Cube against, if you will, when you're out there asking questions of the growers. And one of the big things we have in this environment is understanding the planter setup that we're in, the markets that we're in. So we have a series of products that you can use depending on how you can get on the acre. So today, last time we were together back in November, we were talking a lot about the Tune-Up Plus and the residue release and some of our PGR opportunities. So really, I'd like everybody to think in your mind, in that soybean planter, we have very, very few liquid systems. Mm-hmm. And then the corn, we have some parts of the country that have no liquid, and we have some parts of the country that everybody has. And I can't quite figure out the trend. But so as you lean in to helping your farmers, we have the Tune-Up Plus, the residue release. The Tune-Up Plus can be obviously a great product to recommend when there's no liquid on either planter. I think when you start looking at liquid on planter, we can, I know a lot of us are thinking about Tune-Up Plus and a pint of the NutriBoost N Z-Up product, and then with the foliar. So I just wanted to bring that back in some context that, you are going to have to apply your knowledge and understand the equipment set up to get the most. I think we have a lot of opportunities in a lot of different scenarios, and I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so a couple of points, and really, the big part of the research farm is to try and create data to move ahead, to stay with those first runners, those early adopters of technology. And a lot of the technology today is about applying different things directly to the seed, whether it be a cotton seed or a soybean seed or a potato, or any of these things that really, and when we get them directly in seed, rice and wheat are really responsive. And you think about those row configurations of rice and wheat, they're very narrow. It's hard to actually put a liquid system together or something. So you can put these new biologicals, metals like a zinc or a manganese, or you pick it, you can actually today apply that onto the seed coat. And once we do that, as we evaluate these ways of accomplishing putting that on that seed directly, we're actually seeing about a 3 to 10 times better value for that seed. And we think about that, as to why would that be? Well, as we think about a corn plant, or at least what we believe is happening in a corn plant, we plant that seed in 50-degree soil temperature here in Illinois. As we do that, we expect the moisture to start being imbibed into that kernel about 2 to 3 days. And so we really watch our weather pattern coming up. If it's going to be a warming trend and we're 50 degrees, great, we're planting, we're going as fast as we can. And we don't have time to mess with a lot of liquids and starters, but we can apply biologicals, we can apply metals. And when we do that, that moisture is now imbibing some of that metal, some of those biologicals are getting activated through that process, and it actually is stimulating a better germinating corn kernel, soybean kernel, you name it, wheat, rice, it's changing those markets. So we're actually seeing that being a better delivery system, and a lot of growers are considering, we are at the research farm, moving and just putting products in talc-based systems in on the kernel, on the crop, and then taking, and once we've done that, then moving, if we have a starter system, moving it out 2 inches to the side and putting more nutrition out there, whether it be additional zinc or phosphorus or what have you.
Very good. Thank you for that. There was a question out there about clarifying NKB versus boron. I think it was NKB. Any other questions for Ed? We're gonna just to, so everybody can get back to their day here. We'll probably wrap up a little bit. So as you're out here making farm calls and getting these orders written, we're going to get the our strategy is residue release, tune up plus, or NutriBoost Z up, or Prophase in that for liquid market. Then we really want to get this NutriBoost N and NKB out here. And I think some of you are newer to selling these products, you kind of grew up in the seed business. That's where I started my career, selling Funks G, Ciba-Geigy seeds, NK seeds. You're going to get some pushback. I don't want to position my foliars until I know if I have a crop. I'm just going to go through a couple common objections. Let's wait till we get those out there. Let's wait and see if we have a crop to feed, which is a tough one to overcome. But I think getting a commitment to 25-50% of their crop right now with a foliar program using the data. You all have this information on a recording from YouTube, is a great way to set the foundation, and plus that up as we get another great time to go see them right after emergence. So start to plan your call activity, start to plan your questions you're going to ask. The other thing I always like to say, and if Peter, in the foliar market, you're going to run into really 3 broad situations. The non-user, which is a whole different ball of wax. Then you're going to have a high-end user, a next level type, a total acre type user who's doing a lot of tissue testing and really understands foliars. And then you're going to have somebody that's really trying to push some high yield acres. Obviously, there's more segments to that, but those are 3 kind of buckets that you're going to need to sell into. And I think with the data that Ed and the research that the Brandt organization can provide Streamline, you have a hell of a great foundation to get that person that's trying to lean in on their high yield acres to put a program together.
Yeah, and I jump in there to say, especially that non-user, that's probably the biggest market segment, the opportunity out there when you look at the non-user, and there's some that are using products. Obviously, that total acre segment, they're great because just the correlation back to Brandt, they already have a lot of respect. That group has a lot of respect for those products and know that they work. So that's a great affiliation. But you even get some that use 1 or 2 things. They're using something because somebody told them use this at this time, but they may not even be sure why, and so it's a pretty easy relationship to come in and be a good consultant. And basically what Ed put together here, it's an excellent tool to be able to just go in and understand keep it basic, and when guys say, hey, I don't know what my crop's going to be like in foliar season, I don't try to discount or argue about what I don't know. I try to talk about what I know, which is we don't know what the weather's going to be like. We just know it's probably going to be stressful. We know that for a fact because there has never been a perfect growing season. I don't think in any of our careers that we can say is perfect. So because we know that the genetic potential that's in that bag is much higher than what we're typically pulling out of the field, which means there's stresses and things that happen. So how do you if you're as you're selling, you're talking, you got the planter box treatment. That's as Ed mentioned, get that crop off to a good start. If you don't get that crop off to a good start, you're already behind. So get that crop off to a good start, maximize root development and emergence, and then on corn, for example, at B4, 5, 6, we're in there determining yield. We're setting rows around. We're providing stress through a herbicide application. Mother Nature is probably providing a certain level of stresses, so we mitigate that, right, with the NutriBoost N, and then when we go into our fungicide trip or our pre-tassel trip, we at that point we're converting to retaining yield. And then and the way we retain grain is that we got to move those nutrients from the crop to the grain, and NKB is going to help provide that, plus mitigate that stress. So it's really, those things are going to happen every year. And so that's where I try to focus the conversation around what we know is going to happen. We know emergence is going to be beneficial. We know that if we maximize our yield opportunity at V4-5, we know that's beneficial. And we know that if we try to retain grain and maximize yield potential at VT, that's going to be beneficial. So, and then the same thing with soybeans, same thing with cotton. I mean, you can really take a lot of what we learned here and pretty easily provide that information to the grower. So that's where I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Just keep it.
Well, we had a discussion a few years back about, well, do we need a fighter brand of a lower value of foliar products? And we all decided absolutely not. One, because we don't want to unplug sprayers. I know there's some Maxin people on this call. We had some issues in our earlier career where we did plug some things, the quality. There are a lot of products out here that will say it's the same thing. You'll see Versamax, you'll see Kalo, you'll see Anderson's, Ag Explore. These are companies that, they do not have the smart technology that Ed walked through. So you can hang your head very, very high and knowing you're bringing a world-class formula to the market. Last thing, we'll let everybody go, is these Optiline products, Optiline Complete. Remember, you have the only all-in-one that's actually water-based, truly ammonium sulfate, all-in-one with a drift and deposition in one jug. It's convenience. Don't forget the utility products. That'll go on with all these. The Optiline Complete will go on with your NutriBoost N. Your Optiline 2D will go out there with your NKB, so we can get that deposition and coverage on that plant with the fungicide pass. And with that, one more big thank you to Ed Corrigan. Appreciate your time. I know you get asked to do a lot of things all over the country and the world. Actually, I think you were in South Africa the last time I was trying to get a hold of you or something. And so we're lucky to have Ed to spend time with us. So
it's been an enjoyment. Thanks. See you, Juice.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.